I thought about, at the start of the pandemic, how I could sum it up. And to be honest, it was hard not to include swear words. But the way I think about it and thought about it is probably it's a roller coaster. It was strange really because my pH and everything is pretty much well under control, and then you just get told get given a label that you are extremely clinically vulnerable. And at the time, I was thinking that's a bit over the top, isn't it? It's quite a strong word, and it's using that word vulnerable because I don't typically like using that word vulnerable because I don't always consider myself. I am because, like I say, my pH and everything else is under control at the moment. So that was a bit strange, but it is what it is, and you had to then just follow the guidelines based on that. It was a bit frustrating when you hear all these press releases and people talk about ECV people, and they just refer to you as the elder population, and I'm like, I'm in my 40s. Didn't have the busiest social calendar ever prior to COVID, but the little things that I did, go to the football with my old man every other week for home games, going out with the wife to different places, the cinema or the pub, or for a meal, or just meeting up with mates at the pub. Basically, that was what my life was like before. But then obviously when everything kicked in, all of that just went. It wasn't as bad at first to an extent because everyone was in lockdown. So you were still, yes, you were, CEV, but to an extent you're in pretty much the same situation as most people. It was only when more restrictions lifted and everyone else could go out, and you're like, oh, I'm still here. Absolutely nothing changed. Yes, some of the guidance was relaxed, but I didn't feel comfortable, following that relaxed guidance. So I just followed my own guidance and and remained the same. Because I think at that time as well, there was loads of conversations around, people who are CEV, if they need a ventilator, they wouldn't have one, and coming up to that as well, there wasn't really any vaccines as well, or they'd only just come in, and was unsure about all of them. So absolutely nothing changed for me at all. Absolutely nothing changed for me at all. And it's the same for the wife, Diane. She stopped her job. Sorry. Dan's effectively by proxy CEV herself, because there's no point in me shielding and being in my bubble if Dan's then going out into the workplace and her bubble then gets bigger and bigger, and then there's the worry of bringing it home to myself. So yeah, it's had a big impact on everybody really, to be fair, but especially the wife, because like I say, she's stopped doing what she's doing purely to support myself. Because like I say, she's not CEV, but she's, we felt that we both had to shield others. No point, if she was going into work, then I may as well go into work. I may as well go into the shops and whatnot. So it's a sort of all or none. So it has been difficult, and there's been the stresses there. Like, for example, Diane still doesn't hug her parents. Well, when the vaccines, obviously, there was lots on the news, lots of positives, lots of scaremongering and whatnot, but I was happy to take whatever interventions, were available. So yeah, I didn't have any apprehensions about taking the vaccines, and fortunately I didn't have any side effects either from taking the vaccines. But with the vaccines, there's different efficacies and whatnot. But if you call it an average of 85%, what I always tend to say is if a condom had 85% protection, you wouldn't just use it, and you'd do other interventions. So yes, I've now had 5 vaccines, but I'm still doing the additional interventions of shielding, because you know, to me, unless it's 100%, then I'm not confident in it. So now it's August 22. I had my fifth vaccination probably around about 2 to 3 months ago. But nothing's really changed. I'm happy to have the vaccinations just in case that I do catch COVID. But I do other interventions and just constantly doing risk assessments in my head whilst I'm going around. So I'm still not comfortable going out, socialising, supermarkets, pubs, cinemas, restaurants, etc. Just because I think the average efficacy is around 85%, and I don't feel comfortable or secure enough based on that 85%. One of the reasons is, pulmonary hypertension is a rare disease and a small population can get that. And, with that 15%, which is still missing to take it to the 100%, I'm like, well, I was unfortunate enough to catch, to have pulmonary hypertension, so I could be unfortunate enough to catch COVID. Someone's got to be, in that statistic. Well, one thing to resume normal life would be to have a vaccine which is 100% effective, which isn't feasible, to be honest, is it? It's not realistic. I would be more comfortable if some restrictions are still in, some of the basics, e.g. wearing a mask, hands, face space. If that was still in, I'd feel a bit more comfortable. I feel less comfortable now the restrictions have left because people aren't doing that typically, definitely from not what I see. You pop in a shop and you'll literally be the only one person with a mask on. So I'm a lot more anxious now than when people were shielding and following the guidance. Well, originally, Diane and I we isolated from each other for 2 weeks just in case we already had it. So we isolated ourselves, separate rooms. We got extra kettle and extra toaster, so I could be confined in this little space. And then just literally followed the guidance down to the letter. Nobody, people had to do shopping for us, for example, but that was just literally left on the doorstep and you talk through the window. The only one thing I did do from time to time was go down the allotment, which is literally a 3-minute walk away, or have people around in the front garden, but still keeping literally 10-15 meters distance, The allotment's been great support. I've been fortunate, very fortunate really, that I've got a good support network in terms of family. My mum, dad, brother and sister both live, a few miles away. So that's been beneficial because they were literally doing all the shops, especially through the first lockdown and a bit into the second one. So that's been good to have that network, because I know other people who are CV, etc., didn't necessarily have that support. The other thing, because you always got to have a look for the positives, for the silver linings, or it can quickly send you over the edge. So, I've got a front and back garden. There's some people who've been in a top story flat, for example, and haven't got that privilege. And then they haven't got that privilege as well of being able to get to that open space. As if I couldn't get out of the house, then, to be honest, it would have been different. So looking back over the last 2.5 years, I wouldn't have done anything differently. Wouldn't have done anything differently at all. I feel slightly more positive about the future. Like I previously said at the beginning, there was the scaremongering around lack of ventilators. There wasn't the vaccines, but now I feel a bit more confident, but still not 100% because I've had my 5 jabs. Just to the left of me, I've got a PCR test which was sent through. So if I do have a positive, I can do that. And then if that is positive, then I can have the antivirals. So that's makes me a lot more confident than 2 years ago when none of that was there, and it was just see how it goes. So yeah, I do feel a bit more confident, but nothing, like I say, nothing's changed. Still Shields. It's just become the new norm because it's just gone on for that long period of time. It's just how it is now.